I asked my chief of staff to contact the governor's office to see if we can have a meeting today. And my purpose was to talk to the governor about the special session, about the school funding bill. And he said he wouldn't meet unless I released the bill. And I said, well, that's what the purpose of the meeting is, to talk about how I don't want to release the bill yet and about how I want to talk about the way in which we can perhaps reach a compromise. So he refused to meet with me. So then I called him myself personally, and I said, Governor, I want to meet with you between the next few days. Call off the special sessions, and let's have a meeting. You can bring whoever you want. Purpose of which is to discuss the school funding bill. And I said, and if you don't want to meet, I promise you by Monday I'll send you the bill. He said, absolutely not. So he refuses to meet. Now, what I wanted to do was kind of explain to him and his staff and everybody else how the mandatory veto process works, to explain why it would be a good idea to negotiate before we get into this confrontational mood. So the governor, we send a bill to him. He can either sign it or he can mandatorily veto it. It sounds like he's going to make some major changes, which exceeds his constitutional authority. If he does that, we only have one option, and that is to override. If we override the bill, there's no compromise, there's no changes, that's the only thing we can do. Then it goes to the House. If they override, it becomes the law, and the governor missed an opportunity to compromise. If the House doesn't override, or if we don't override, there's no bill. There's no mandatory veto. I don't even know if he gets that, or if the people of the state of Illinois get that. And then what would happen? Then we'd have to start negotiating a new bill, which is what I'm trying to start to do right now, but not have to wait till that time. Because there's constitutional requirements that you vote within a certain number of days after he receives the mandatory veto, after he receives the bill. So I just asked for a meeting. And he refused to have a meeting with the President of the Senate. I told him the Speaker's not going to be there if that's what's bothering you. Bring whoever you want. I want to explain the bill to him and find out what his problem is with it. And then if it doesn't work, you get the bill on Monday. Won't meet. Now, there's been a lot of confusion in his own statements about what his mandatory veto would be. Another reason to show it to us, so we know just what the areas of disagreement are. So in the past, I've talked to him to try to go over the rationale between Senate Bill 1 and give him the history. His own commission was set up to make recommendations. They didn't actually draft a bill, so we did it for him. This is an area that he should take credit for. He's been for education reform. He knows that we have the worst school funding formula in the nation. And so here we have drafted a bill that has broad-based support from all of the interest groups and touches on the entire state in a fair way. And I'm afraid that he's acting out of anger. You know, he has had a bad month. I mean, we've overridden him, I think, 4 times in a row. Half his staff was either fired or quit. And I just wanted to have a meeting with him so we could talk rationally about what's in the bill. And so, let me tell you what I told him before about what's in this bill. This is really important. There's 2 parts to Senate Bill 1. The first part deals with pensions, okay? Now, we have passed a budget over his veto. That budget sends almost $4 billion to the teachers' retirement system. $600 million more than last year. That's not a bailout for suburban and downstate school districts. That's how much money they get for their pension system by the law. Chicago by law, gets, I think, 12 million. 4 billion, 12 million. So this bill gives Chicago the normal cost for their pensions, about $220 million extra dollars. Okay, that's it. That's pension parity, equal. They each get their normal cost. And of course, in the case of the teachers' retirement system, they get all that other cost too, that legacy catch-up cost. That's in the bill. It addresses an anomaly that's been in the law forever. The second part of the bill is a new school aid formula. And it's a major compromise from what we've in the Senate have passed in years past. Because what we're saying is we're not going to take $7 billion new dollars and run through a new formula. We're not going to do that. We're going to let everybody keep what they got last year. The rich school districts, the poor school districts, however you got it under this worst in the nation formula, you get to keep what you got last year. And then any new money is going to go through a new formula, which is progressive, which directs money where it's needed for where there's a high concentration of poverty and corrects the errors of the past. That's the compromise. Everybody gets what they got last year, including Chicago, including every school district. And there's $350 million new dollars that goes through that formula. And we think Chicago, by the way, since this focus has been on Chicago, they get about $70 million, about 20% of that. So, two parts of the bill. Pension parity. I would call it partial pension parity because if we really wanted to have pension parity, we'd also give even more money to Chicago. When we gave that money in the appropriation process to the TRS, we didn't bail out downstate, we didn't bail out the suburbs. We paid for their normal cost and their legacy cost. In the case of Chicago, in this bill, we're paying just for their normal cost. In the case of the formula, we have a brand new formula that ends all the special deals, and it has a formula for the whole state. It abolishes the block grant in Chicago, abolishes it. But what I hear is that the governor thinks that somehow it's a bailout if we give Chicago $220 million and teachers' retirement system $4 billion. So somehow that's a bailout. That's nonsense. And there's some kind of an extra money we're giving to Chicago by acknowledging that everybody gets to keep what they got last year. Apparently he thinks everybody should get what they got last year except for Chicago. So this is the discussion I would like to have with him to try to find out what he wants to change. Maybe there's some things that he wants to change. But he won't even meet with me. So I renew my request, be happy to meet with him. He called a special session, but he didn't introduce any legislation to vote on. The legislation he would want to vote on is this bill, which we're hoping, against hope, that he will not a mandatory veto, sit down and renegotiate it before you get into this confrontation. Happy to answer any questions.
Senator sending that bill to his desk on Monday.
Yeah.
Senator, the governor said today that you called him and said, I want to meet with you Monday in Chicago, not today.
No, well, I had already asked for a meeting today, and he said, and through his chief of staff, I asked my chief of staff, Kristen Richards, to call his new chief of staff, and she said, no, he won't meet with you unless you send him the bill. I said, I want to talk about not sending him the bill. You get it? He didn't want to meet with me. So then I called him and talked to him personally. He called me back, thank you, and then we had this conversation. I said, I want to meet with you. But I'm going to send the significance of Monday is I'll give you the bill. I can't wait forever for him to not want to meet with me because we do have to have this override, apparently, if he's not going to agree to a meeting. So I'm going to give it to him on Monday, all right?
If the governor says that you're holding on to the bill under orders from the Speaker.
That's insulting. That's just insulting. I'm the one that wants to meet with them to negotiate. He calls a meeting a sham, but he has special sessions with no legislation to vote on, costing taxpayer dollars with nothing for the legislators to do.
Why are you waiting until Monday?
Because I want to re-emphasize, I hope I don't have to repeat, the benefits of having an agreement. If we go through this process where we fail to override the governor's veto, if that happens, there's no law. That's it's a month from now.
Will your chamber be able to?
I don't know. But if it happens that it doesn't get overridden, there's no law. There's no mandatory veto by default. And there's therefore no opportunity to send money to the schools that we appropriated.
Why not?
This is really important procedurally to understand this. I think I've been here longer than the governor and understand how this works. If he does an mandatory veto, then it's confrontational and it's locked in.
He would say it's constitutional. Why not change the law to take the Chicago pensions and wrap them in with TRS? Why?
That could be done. If we had a meeting and he said, here's what I want you to do. Take the pension bill, which is in the base formula, and move it over to the TRS appropriation, and that's all we do, I'd do that.
He said he's willing to do that,
And that's it?
but he wants to just keep that conversation separate from getting.
But if it's in the same law, then we'd have to pass a new law, right? We have to make sure it passes, wouldn't we? So we have to pass a new law then, wouldn't we? And I'd be for that. You know why? Because when you do that, when you take the appropriation for the pensions out of the base and you move it over to the TRS, Chicago gets an extra $7 million. So I'd be in favor of that.
But aren't you mandatory veto confrontational? He would call it constitutional. How do you see the governor's limits?
Yeah.
The constitutional limits on this AV?
He certainly can do a mandatory veto if he exceeds his authority, because there's case law that says you can't totally rewrite a bill, then he would exceed it. When he does that, if he rewrites the whole bill with major changes, then we can't accept it.
But isn't the key part of this bill the evidence-based model? And how would the governor's AV remove any of those 27 criteria?
I don't know. He hasn't showed it to us. Why doesn't he show it to us? Then we'd find out if he exceeds his authority. I just want to have a meeting with him. I want to have a meeting with him so he can show me what his changes are, and if we have to pass a new law, like you suggested, he wants to change the Chicago pensions, he wants to take it out of the base formula and put it in the TRS, we'd have to pass a new law for that. So that's what, we'd have an agreement, we'd come back down here and we'd pass a new law. When he does it like this, I think a lot of people don't understand how this happened, this works. It'd be good for me to repeat myself. If he does an mandatory veto that exceeds his authority, we have only one choice, and that's to override. We don't have the ability to go and accept his mandatory veto. And if it fails, then we have to start over again with a new law. His mandatory veto doesn't become the law by default. Yeah, we'd have to vote on a new law, you see, because you can't take a motion up if his mandatory powers have exceeded the authority. Someone could sue if we accepted that. Even if we accepted his mandatory veto, somebody could sue and say it exceeded his authority.
What makes this particular issue, we haven't seen this happen much at all, where you hold a bill for nearly 2 months. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, it's because of the mental state of the governor. It's been the fact that, as I said, he's really had a bad month. And he's done this in the past where he kind of, loses his... I'm just asking for a meeting, guys. I mean, I'm not trying to be confrontational.
The office has said you don't want a knee-jerk reaction, but I mean, in the legislative process, 2 chambers pass a bill, they send it off to the governor. Why hold that process up, and why not get it done? If you're going to AV it, get it done.
Yeah, right. Why not sign it? Why not sign it?
Well, but
Why not sign it? It's everything he asked for. He said it was 90% through his Secretary of Education, 90% of what he wanted. I don't even know what the 10% is that he doesn't want, because he sent his own kids to the Chicago public schools. So I don't know why he wants to hone in on Chicago, which is what he said. That's why I have a lot of confidence in myself. I think I understand this bill. I understand what he wants to do. I think if we had a chance to talk, and maybe he's been getting bad advice from his new staff. Maybe they don't understand the bill. Maybe they're not for the bill. Maybe that's the problem. So I just want to have a meeting. He won't have a meeting. Isn't that amazing?
does that happen with any other legislation where you guys?
Well, this is a pretty big piece of legislation, funding the schools.
If you had a chance to talk to him and were willing to offer up some kind of compromise on this based on what you think he's looking for, changes in particularly the legacy payments for the pensions, what would you tell him you would be willing to compromise on that you think might settle this and get the funding through?
Yeah, You know, I laid out what I think's in the bill and the fairness of it, right? Pension parity, hard to argue against. Everybody gets what they got last year, hard to argue against. New formula only applies to the new money. There was one suggestion, well, what if you if you shuffle the pensions from the formula over to the TRS appropriation? Sure, I could do that. We'd have to pass a new bill, but that's open. That's an example of a compromise.
I think people are watching this and they'll be confused, like.
I know, that's why I'm here.
Why not send off the bill? What have you seen from Governor Rauner in the last 2.5 years that suggests that you can negotiate with him, as you're doing right now, through us to change his mind?
You're pretty cynical about the governor's willingness to compromise. I mean, I'm just asking him to meet with me. Maybe he'll.
It's not gonna happen before Monday, let's be
Well,
honest.
don't be so cynical. Give him a chance. Monday, let's go. What's wrong?
Why do you think he does not want to meet with you?
I don't know. I told him the speaker wouldn't be there if that was part of the problem. Told him he can bring anybody he wants. If he doesn't want to show me his mandatory veto, okay, then let's just talk about the bill. It's the legislature. He's the governor. I'm the president of the Senate. Think about it. It's amazing. Yes, ma'am.
So what's on the agenda for the next 3 days?
There's no bills. He could have taken his mandatory veto and introduced it as a new bill. We'd assign it to a committee and have hearings.
Any word of Governor Rauner trying to add workers' comp or,
No, but heard good news today on workers' comp. Brand new report out from NCCI, the insurance organization that makes recommendations for reductions. They're going to recommend over a 10% cut in next year's workers' comp premiums without any changes to the law. So the total is going to be somewhere about 36% reduction in premiums since we passed that major piece of legislation 4 years ago. Now, that having been said, sure, that would be something we could talk about if we had an actual meeting, but we can't have a meeting because he doesn't want to meet.
well, just to clarify, no word that he's been trying to add those pieces into the negotiating mix?
We haven't had a meeting for him to tell me that.
Senators, you know, we have dueling realities here between what you're saying and the governor. He was saying when you're going through SB 1, the whole time, this money he would call the bailout to Chicago wasn't in there, and then it was slipped in at the last moment.
Another amazing misunderstanding, I guess, because that's not what happened. There was some technical amendments that were put on in the House. When we passed the bill out of the Senate, we had this pension parity, and we had the new money, and we had the new formula. Another reason why we should have a meeting.
The governor also said this morning that downstate schools would be losing money, like Springfield, for instance, would miss $500,000.
Losing money. This is why you have to have a meeting. Everybody gets what they got last year, and there's $350 million new dollars, which goes to varying degrees based on a new formula to everybody. That's what the law is.
I'm still trying to understand why a meeting now, after both chambers have passed it, procedurals hold on it. Why not meet before the bill is even drafted to say, we're gonna put this together, it's got the funding reform, but we're also gonna put this pension dollars in there? Why not have a meeting beforehand, before the bill was even brought up?
Wow. We had the legislative process. We had committee hearings. We had years and years of meetings. This is a growth of bills that Senator Menard had in the past. These meetings that the governor's staff convened, we sent members to that. But they chose not to draft a bill. So we drafted a bill and we introduced it, passed it out of the Senate. It was a Senate bill, so it wasn't take it or leave it. The House amended it. There's hearings. The governor's part of the process. There's Republican members of the Senate that attended all those. So then we passed attended the commission meetings. They're in the legislature. I've explained what I think's my understanding of what's in the bill. I think it makes sense. I think he should sign it, and he hasn't chosen to do so. So hopefully we can meet between now and next Monday. If not, we'll send the bill to him, and then we'll be on this path to have a veto override. If we override him in the House, in the Senate and the House, then we'll have the law.
Will you be here tomorrow?
I don't know what we would do tomorrow. We're in session. We'll gavel in.
How long will this process take? If there's no override, so people at home are wondering, okay, so what's this gonna look like?
Yeah, sometime I think we better do something soon. That's why I wanted to meet now. If we have to go on this process of veto overrides. It takes a couple weeks, get two chambers. It would make much more sense to have a meeting and a compromise. So the schools probably need their money pretty soon, and so I'm urging that we meet as soon as possible. He's turned us down.